policy, governance, and financing of biodiversity conservation in the Philippines. As people become more vigilant about the state of the environment and insistent that offenders of environmental laws be held accountable, policy, framework, and governance of biodiversity in the Philippines are in place with the intent of protecting the environment and aid people from all walks of life in their pursuit to a balanced and healthful ecology. Policies that contribute to biodiversity conservation in the Philippines. Philippine Constitution. Under Article 2, Section 16, the state shall protect and advance the right of the people to a balanced and healthful ecology in accord with the rhythm and harmony of nature. Under Article 12, Section 5, the state, subject to the provisions of this Constitution and national development policies and programs, shall protect the rights of indigenous cultural communities to their ancestral lands to ensure their economic, social, and cultural well-being. NIPAS Act of 1992, RA 7586. It provides the legal framework for the establishment and management of protected areas in the Philippines. Identified 202 initial components comprising of proclaimed national parks, game refuge and wildlife sanctuaries, nature reserves, wilderness areas, mangrove reserves, watershed reservations, fish sanctuaries, protected landscapes, and seascapes. The responsible agency is DENR BMB. Wildlife Resources Conservation and Protection Act, RA 9147. It supersedes EO 247 in the regulation of bioprospecting activities, the details of which are outlined in Joint DENR-DA Palawan Council for Sustainable Development. It provides for procedures on the conduct of scientific researches on wildlife, as outlined in Joint DENR-DA PCSD. Conserve and protect wildlife species and their habitats. Regulate the collection and trade of wildlife. Pursue the Philippine commitment to international conventions. Initiate or support scientific studies. Responsible agencies are the following. DENR covers all terrestrial plant and animal species, all turtles and tortoises, and wetland species, including but not limited to crocodiles, water birds, and all amphibians and dugong. DA covers all declared aquatic critical habitats, all aquatic resources, including but not limited to all fishes, aquatic plants, invertebrates, and all marine mammals except dugong. PCSD covers the province of Palawan. National Caves and Cave Resources Management and Protection Act, RA 9072. Caves and cave resources are part of the country's natural wealth. It mandates the DENR to formulate, develop, and implement a national program for the management, protection, and conservation of caves and cave resources. The national and regional cave committees oversee the implementation of the Act and its support policies. The responsible agency, DENR BMB. The Philippine Fisheries Code of 1998, RA 8550. The state shall ensure the attainment of the following objectives of the fishery sector: conservation, protection, and sustained management of the country's fishery and aquatic resources, poverty alleviation, and the provision of supplementary livelihood among municipal fisher folk, improvement of productivity of aquaculture within the ecological limits, optional utilization of offshore and deep-sea resources, and upgrading of post-harvest technology. The responsible agency, DA. The IPRA Act of 1997, RA 8371. It recognizes and promotes all the rights of ICCs, IPs of the Philippines. This law recognizes the ancestral land rights of the IPs. The responsible agency, NCIP. ITA's Traditional Environmental Management. In the 1970s, the Magbukon Aitas moved to higher elevation of their ancestral domain to start a new beginning. For a time, they divided into two groups. Some families opted to live in Biga, while others settled in Kanawan. Later, they joined together in Kanawan because the water source in Biga is difficult. In 1987, former President Corazon C. Aquino proclaimed the 227 hectares of Bataan Natural Park as Kanawan Negrito Reservation Area. Today, there are about 41 hectares of land occupied by 13 non-indigenous migrant families, and 186 hectares are used by the Aitas, with about 156 hectares for agricultural and agroforestry use, 2 hectares for the residential use, 1 hectare for the elementary school, and 30 hectares protected reforestation and sloping areas that are not suitable for farming. The Aitas have their own traditional practices in conserving and protecting natural resources. Their concept of conservation is integrated with the Aitas' indigenous knowledge, systems, and practices. There are many distinct ways in the Aitas' daily lives that indicate their traditional practices of conserving the environment. Dispersing forest tree seeds like birds. When the Aitas hunt, they pick up seeds found in the forest and throw these away in other areas. This way, the natural diffusion of the diversity of plants takes place through human intervention. The Aitas have, through generations, developed the proper way of gathering honey in such a way that the bee colony will not die. Harvesting what is needed. The Aitas harvest only what they need for a day. They do not harvest more than what they able to consume or sell. They do not overharvest or avoid salanta or destroying the balance of nature. Philippine Mining Act of 1995, RA 7942. All mineral resources in public and private lands within the territory and EEZ of the Republic of the Philippines are owned by the state. It shall be the responsibility of the state to promote their rational exploration, development, utilization, and conservation through the combined efforts of government and the private sector in order to enhance national growth in a way that effectively safeguards the environment and protect the rights of affected communities. The responsible agency, DENR-MGB. Philippine Clean Water Act of 2004, RA 9275. The law aims to protect the country's water bodies from land-based pollution sources, industries and commercial establishments, agriculture, and community household activities. It provides for a comprehensive and integrated strategy to prevent and minimize pollution through a multi-sectoral and participatory approach involving all the stakeholders. Anyone discharging wastewater into a water body will have to pay a wastewater charge. This economic instrument will encourage investments in cleaner production and pollution control technologies to reduce the amount of pollutants generated and discharged. The responsible agency, DENR-EMB. Philippine Ecological Solid Waste Management Act of 2000, RA 9003. It provides the legal framework for the country's systematic, comprehensive, and ecological solid waste management program that shall ensure protection of public health and the environment. The responsible agencies, National Solid Waste Management Commission, oversees the implementation of solid waste management plans and prescribes policies to achieve the objectives of the Act. National Ecology Center. It is under the National Solid Waste Management Commission and provides consulting, information, training, and networking services for the implementation of the provisions of RA 9003. Pursuant to the relevant provisions of RA 7160, otherwise known as the Local Government Code, the LGUs shall be primarily responsible for the implementation and enforcement of the provisions of the Act within their respective jurisdictions. Philippine Toxic Substances and Hazardous and Nuclear Waste Control Act, RA 6969. The Act provides the legal framework to regulate, restrict, or prohibit the importation, manufacture, processing, sale, distribution, use, and disposal of chemical substances and mixtures that present unreasonable risk and or injury to health or the environment, to prohibit the entry, even in transit, of hazardous and nuclear waste and their disposal into the Philippine territorial limits for whatever purpose, and to provide advancement and facilitate research and studies on toxic chemicals. The responsible agency, DENR-EMB. Climate Change Act of 2009, RA 9729. The Act aims to systematically integrate the concept of climate change in the policy formulation and development plans of all government agencies and units, to the end that the government will be prepared for the impact of climate change. The responsible agency, CCC. People's Survival Fund, RA 10174. It provides long-term finance streams to enable the government to effectively address the problem of climate change, amending the Climate Change Act of 2009. Responsible agency, CCC. Environmental Awareness and Education Act of 2008, RA 9512. The Act promotes environmental awareness through environmental education and covers the integration of such in the school curricula at all levels, be it public or private, including daycare, preschool, non-formal, technical, vocational, indigenous learning, and out-of-school youth courses or programs. It also declares November as the Environmental Awareness Month in the Philippines. The responsible agencies are DepEd, CHED, Technical Education and Skills Development Authority, DSWD, DENR, and DOST. Philippine Environmental Impact Statement System, Presidential Decree 1586. This law requires private corporations, firms or entities including agencies and instrumentalities of the government to prepare an EIS for every proposed project and undertaking that significantly affect the quality of the environment. The responsible agency, DENR-EMB. The EIS system aids proponents in incorporating environmental considerations in planning their projects as well as in determining the probable impacts that the project may have on the environment. Environmental impact assessment is a process that involves predicting and evaluating the likely impacts of a project, including cumulative impacts on the environment during construction, commissioning, operation, and abandonment. It also includes designing appropriate preventive, mitigating, and enhancement measures in addressing these consequences so as to protect the environment and, more importantly, the human community's welfare. Local Government Code RA 7160. Under Section 17, provinces can enforce forestry laws limited to community-based forestry projects, pollution control law, small-scale mining law, and other laws on the protection of the environment, and mini hydroelectric projects for local purposes. The responsible agency, DILG. Revised Forestry Code of the Philippines, PD 705. This act lays down the basic principles of forest management and conservation, makes provision for proper classification, management, and utilization of public domain lands to maximize their productivity and meet the demands of the country's increasing population. The revised Forestry Code of the Philippines also covers management of industrial tree plantations, tree farms, and agroforestry farms, forest protection of swamp lands, and mangrove forests. The Act also covers special uses of forest resources such as grazing, wildlife, and recreation, and prescribes criminal offenses, including unlawful occupation or destruction of forest lands and grazing lands. Responsible Agency, DENR-FMB. Rules of Procedure for Environmental Cases. In April 2010, a Philippine legislature promulgated the Rules of Procedure for Environmental Cases 15, a landmark instrument representing a significant reform in environmental litigation and protection. This laid down procedures governing the civil, criminal, and special civil actions in all trial courts regarding environmental cases with a view to protecting and advancing the constitutional right of the people to health and to a balanced and healthful ecology, and providing a simplified, speedy, and inexpensive procedure for the enforcement of environmental rights under Philippines law. The Rules of Procedure for Environmental Cases empowers the courts to issue environmental protection orders as an immediate action to protect the environment and the communities affected. This also enables communities to petition for the suspension or stoppage of destructive environmental and development activities through the citizens' suit provision. The Responsible Agency, Supreme Court. International commitments to biodiversity conservation. There are several international conventions and conferences of which the Philippines is either a signatory to the Multilateral Environmental Agreements, MAEA, of the conventions or a participating party to the international conferences. The Philippines is a signatory to the MAEAs that include the CBD, Framework Convention on Climate Change, and the Convention to Combat Desertification. With these international conventions, the Philippines has legal obligations to develop its national strategies and plans for its fulfillment of the objectives of the conventions. Commitment, Convention on Biological Diversity. The Philippines, with 154 other states and the European Union, have signed the CBD in June 1992 during the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro. The Philippine Senate ratified the Philippine membership to the CBD on October 8, 1993. The Convention on Wetlands, known as the Ramsar Convention. The Ramsar Convention on Wetlands is an intergovernmental treaty that provides the framework for national action and international cooperation for the conservation and wise use of wetlands and their resources. It is the only global environmental treaty that deals with a particular ecosystem. Convention on Migratory Species. Adopted in 1979 and entered into force in 1983, the CMS aims to build and strengthen global conservation efforts for migratory species in the air, on land, and in the seas. CMS, also known as the Bonn Convention, is an international and intergovernmental treaty backed by the United Nations Environmental Program. The Philippines is a member of CMS since 1994 and has been implementing measures such as dialogue with fish folk to eradicate problems related to migratory birds, strengthen enforcement activities in Balabac Straits and in Baguan Island, one of the islands of the Turtle Islands, to address direct capture of the sea turtles. The United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. In September 2007, the UN General Assembly adopted the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. The document emphasizes the rights of IPs to maintain and strengthen their own institutions, cultures, and traditions to pursue their development in keeping their own needs and aspirations. This declaration addresses both individual and collective rights, cultural rights and identity, rights to education, health, employment, language, and others. It also asserts that indigenous peoples and individuals have the right to be free from any kind of discrimination in the exercise of their rights. Cartagena Protocol. In 2006, the Philippines ratified the Cartagena Protocol, a supplementary agreement to the CBD that seeks to protect biodiversity from the potential risks posed by genetically modified organisms resulting from modern biotechnology. Implementation of the protocol entails the cooperation of various stakeholders, including those from governments such as DENR, DA, DOST, and the DOH. In the same year, EO 514 establishing the National Biosafety Framework of the Philippines was issued, providing guidelines for its implementation, strengthening the National Biosafety Committee of the Philippines and for other purposes. Along with other regulations, the NBF is expected to support implementation of the protocol. International Treaty on Plant, Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture. The Philippines also ratified the ITPGRFA in 2006. The objectives of the treaty are similar to that of the CBD but focus on plant genetic resources important to food and agriculture. CITES. This is an international agreement between the governments that aims to ensure that international trade in specimens of wild animals and plants does not threaten their survival. CITES works by subjecting international trade in specimens of selected species to certain controls. All import, export, re-export, and introduction from the sea of species covered by the convention have to be authorized through a licensing system. Governance of biodiversity in the Philippines. The National Capacity Self-Assessment Report of 2005 revealed that the poor coordination among the focal point agencies of the Rio Conventions have led to duplication of tasks, wastage of physical and financial resources, including loss of synergy and complementation in implementing the common tasks related to fulfilling country obligations to MEAs. It was realized that apart from the lack of feedback and monitoring mechanism among MEA FPAs, there is no mechanism to ensure that the country position in one COP is not in conflict with the country position in another COP. There is also no mechanism to ensure that the Philippines' commitments at the international level are disseminated and applied at the local level. The current structure of CCMRD is as follows. Technical agencies with key resource management functions and programs. DENR, Forest Management, Lands Management, Mines and Geosciences, Environmental Management, Ecosystems Research and Development, Biodiversity Management. Function and Program. Conservation, Management, Development, and proper use of the country's environment and natural resources, specifically forest and grazing lands of the public domain, as well as the licensing and regulation of all natural resources to ensure equitable sharing of the benefits derived therefrom for the welfare of the present and future generation of Filipinos. DABPI, Conservation and Development of Philippine Plant Genetic Resources and Protection and Development of the Plant Industry. DABFAR, Function, Improvement of fisheries productivity within ecological limits and empowerment of stakeholders towards food security, inclusive growth, global competitiveness, and climate change adaptation. NCIP, Recognition and Promotion of all the rights of ICC's IPs. Agencies using a supporting ecosystem services. DOST, Philippine Council for Agricultural and Aquatic Resources and Research Management. Strategic leadership in promoting science and technology as a platform for agriculture, aquatic and natural resources products, innovation and environment resiliency. DOST, Central Direction, Leadership and Coordination of Scientific and Technological Efforts and ensuring that the results are geared and utilized in areas of maximum economic and social benefits for the people. Upholding the right of every Filipino for better health through the provision of safe, effective, and affordable traditional and alternative health care products, services, and technologies. One of its functions is to formulate policies for the protection of indigenous and natural health resources and technology for unwarranted exploitation. Agencies on Planning, Monitoring, and Accountability. NEDA, Formulation of development plans and ensures that plan implementation achieves the goals of national development. DBM, Public Expenditure Management to ensure the equitable, prudent, transparent, and accountable allocation and use of public funds to improve the quality of life of every Filipino. Commission Audit, Examination, Audit, and settlement of all accounts pertaining to the revenge and receipts of and expenditures or uses of funds and property owned or held in trust by or pertaining to the government or any of its subdivisions, agencies, or instrumentalities, including government-owned, controlled corporations with original charters. Institutional Framework, LGUs. Province, to acquire and transfer real personal properties, to enter into contracts, including those incurring obligations which are expressly provided by the law, to exercise such other rights and incur such other obligations as are expressly authorized by law. Cities, to levy and collect taxes in accordance with law, to enact ordinances, to provide the public works, constructions, and for the maintenance of a local police force, to establish fire zones within the city and to regulate the type of building which may be constructed within each zone, to provide for the protection of the inhabitants from public calamities and to provide relief in times of emergency. Municipalities and barangays may organize fire brigades, organize groups of citizens to fight criminality and approve all payments from barangay funds. Associated bodies, local specialized bodies and local task forces, inter-LGU coalitions, leagues of local governments, leagues of local government professionals, interface between government and non-government sector, regional development councils, PAMB, local multi-sectoral task forces such as Fisheries and Aquatic Resources Management Council, Bantay Gubat, Bantay Dagat, Watershed Networks, Councils, Solid Waste Task Forces, community institutions, citizen and business networks, tribal councils, POs, citizen networks, CSOs, business chambers. Financing biodiversity conservation programs in the Philippines. The main sources of financing for biodiversity programs in the Philippines are government, national, local, special funds, example, user fees, official development assistance, loans, grants, small grants, emerging innovative financing schemes, PES, corporate social responsibility, volunteer resources. The DENR's budget for biodiversity programs and initiatives has increased from 13,996,243,000 in 2012, 18,044,300,002 in 2013, to 19,833,652,000 in 2014. However, this amount only represents 1% of the Philippines' total government budget. The DENR's 2013 budget is found on the figure below.